Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be talking about all of my top books for 2022. Now, I debated on whether or not I would keep this to a list of like top 10, but then I started writing down my books that kind of like the ones that impacted me the most. And that's not to say that all of these are like full 5 stars. And of course, my rating system goes up to a 6-star, which means it's just like a favorite of a fave. But some of these books are 4.5 stars as well. And it's just these books stood out in my mind when I was looking back on the year. Which ones could I not stop thinking about? And they truly do like just go across the board in every subgenre of romance. So I'm very excited to talk about that. But before we get in, I'm a numbers girl. So I thought I would talk about just like how I did for this year. Usually I make a separate video for this, but I thought quickly going over kind of like my end of the year stats, I thought it would be fun. And I promise I'll be really brief. But truly this stuff does interest me. I like to see how my reading tastes change and what subgenres of romance I gravitate towards and how am I consuming books. So those are a couple categories that we're going to be looking at. So for 2022, I read 306 books. I DNF 5. Now, that's not a completely accurate number for DNF. Some books I didn't even bother writing down that I attempted to read them. Then I reread 78 books compared to the 231 new books that I picked up. And I have a feeling that I'll reread even more in 2023. I just do. Not even just because I'm going to have one more semester of school. Rereads are just better for me while I'm in school because they're less distracting. But also just because the rereads that I did, especially in December, they were so much fun. They were some of my favorite books of all time that I have not read in a very long time because they're not strictly romance, and I had such a great experience. So I think I will be doing a little bit more of that. I do like to keep track of what books I'm reading based on are they indie published or traditionally published, and they're kind of neck and neck. Normally my independently published books outweigh my traditionally published books, but I feel like a couple contributing factors or a couple reasons why trade publishing kind of like upped it. Some were my rereads and others were because they were historical romance, and some were old school historical romance, so they're traditionally published. Now this one was actually interesting when I looked at the stats for my ratings for the year. I don't know why. I was looking at this year and I was thinking about how many books I was quite disappointed with that I ended up by giving 3 stars. Like I had a feeling, I thought that I was going to have the majority of my books, like my average rating, be 3 stars. My average rating was about like 4.25 stars. But again, I think it has a lot to do with rereading books, and also I only picked up new to me books that were pretty much vetted by a lot of people by the romance community. So yeah, a lot of rereads were complete 5 stars. So I think that kind of upped my average rating. This one, I don't want to say I'm sad about it, but it's something that I specifically mentioned in my New Year Booktuber tag, that I want to have a more even distribution of the subgenres of romance that I read, because as you can see, contemporary completely dominated this year. I want more historicals, more fantasies, urban fantasy, sci-fis. I want those to be a bigger piece of the pie. I don't want it just to completely be dominated by contemporary, and I have a feeling that a lot of other people are feeling this way. Of course, I still have the contemporaries that I just am ravenous for, but I feel like I'm ready to just start exploring a little bit more in the historical romance genre. I want to find some more indie historical romance authors and also fantasy. And I think it was McKay that might have mentioned that a lot of authors themselves are actually moving to write more fantasies, whereas normally they would publish contemporaries. That's their like normal, but some authors are also going into the fantasy, sci-fi realm, whatever. And I think that's great. I like an author who can write in multiple genres of romance. I think it's really cool. And then of course, the format in which I consume my books, KU, is completely dominant. I definitely get my money's worth out of KU. That's what I'll say. I specifically look for KU books. And with the ebooks owned, sales are your best friend. Sales are absolutely your best friend. I get a lot of books when they're free. If you're not signed up for BookBub already, you really should, because it lets you know when books are on sale. The romance community is really great on Bookstagram for sharing books that are on sale for like 99 cents or free. And I snatch those up even if I don't read them for months and months. You know, they're just sitting on my Kindle and eventually I'll pick them up. So I do have tons of books like that. And then of course we have the audio side of things. I really do like any play. It does have a good amount of audiobooks that I like to read. Okay, now we are ready to get into my favorites of the year. These are in no particular order. Literally, I went month by month and I grabbed the books that I had high ratings for. I really like the way that I keep track of books now through Airtable. I have a spreadsheet per month, and then I also have a big Excel spreadsheet where I get all my like stats from. But Airtable just makes it really great for like organization, and also it's pretty, and I like pretty things. First up, The Temptation of a Highlander by Lisa Braden. I purposely put off reading this book until the beginning of this year because it actually was published at the end of 2021. And I knew that it was just going to get like forgotten in 2021 if I hurried up and I read it on December 28th when it came out. So I was like, no, we're going to wait a couple days so that I can rave about this book because I knew it was going to love it. And boy, was I right. I just really love Lisa Braden. I really love the McPherson brothers. In this story, our heroine, she has a stalker. Her family was wealthy, but the cousin doesn't give them a big allowance anymore. So they're kind of like relegated to this dingy house on the estate, don't have much money, and then all of a sudden she is getting these letters from her stalker, and she thought her stalker has left her alone. So like the first chapter is like very thrilling. I'm like, oh my God, like none of the other books have started like this. And so I was like, oh my gosh, her life felt like it was in danger. So she decides to travel to Scotland. One of her friends just married a Scotsman, and she decides that she's going to go impose upon them with her grandmother because she's very afraid. There is a scene, I will warn you, for the death of a pet, trigger warning for that. And she was like, we got to get out of Dodge. We're not safe. So she goes over there, and she quickly develops a crush on one of the Scotsman's brothers, Cam. And Cam is so broody and he's quiet. Every time he walks in a room, her tongue she's completely tongue-tied. And he basically is tasked as her bodyguard. So there's a bit of forced proximity element because his house is like off the beaten path, and so she goes to stay with him. And yeah, I really love it. It is wonderful. I love this series. I can't wait for the next one. It was 6 stars for me. Next up is The Tyrant Alpha's Rejected Mate by Kate C. Wells. I really love this book. It started off, I didn't know what to expect when I picked up this book. Obviously, it has a rejected mate trope, which I had not read a lot of before I actually discovered this book in April. I didn't discover this book. Juliet discovered this book and she told me about it. And I think that it was so interesting the way that Kate C. Wells presented this couple. Our heroine, she is part of this shifter pack. Her wolf has never actually surfaced, and the way that this pack works, it's very patriarchal. The women are kind of second-class citizens, but we learn a little bit later that the new alpha of the pack, he's been alpha for a couple years now, he's actually trying to make things better, but it's kind of hard to change the whole pack like all at once. He's making small changes, but he still has to keep the others, especially the men, in line. So our heroine, she's serving dinner because the women, they serve dinner to the highest ranking people and all that, and all of a sudden she feels her wolf surfacing, and the reason why is because this mating bond is snapping into place with the alpha, the new alpha. And he immediately was just kind of like, no, she's mistaken. We're not mates. And the reason why the mating bond snapped into place is because she saw another woman basically sit in his lap, and she was going into possessive mode. So she was trying to defend her man. Her wolf was trying to defend, her fated mate, and he rejects her in front of the whole entire complex. Also, our heroine has a disability because she was attacked whenever she was younger. So the fact that the hero of this story, left her naked and exposed on a floor and completely turned his back on her, I was like, I don't know if this man's gonna have to grovel his ass off. And he did, and I loved it. I especially loved the heroine. She was so strong. She was with a group of women who, they're all single, but they're all kind of like misfits, and that does not keep them down. Some are a little bit stronger in personality than others, but our heroine's definitely like the ringleader, and she has figured out a way, because women can't even own property if they're unmarried and they don't have like a male figure, parental figure, brother, whatever, if they don't have anybody to take care of them. So they kind of are like at the mercy of the pack, but she has found a way to make money, and all of them are benefiting from that. So I love her because she's such a strong character, and she really doesn't let this stupid, stubborn male break her spirit. She's still freaking strong, and I love when he realizes that, oh wait, she is actually my mate and I just messed up royally, and I really loved it. 6 stars, love it. So this year I discovered Mary Balog. This is the first year that I've ever read her before, and one of the most popular series that I've always heard about is the Bedouins. So I started from the top and I read the Bedouins, and and there are many books in this series that are my favorite, but Slightly Scandalous. Slightly Scandalous is definitely my favorite of the bunch. And I'm kind of a little bit surprised that it was, because the heroine Freya, she is a little bit of an unlikable character, and I always have trouble with heroines who are more frustrating, very stubborn, very, very strong-willed. But I think the reason why I like this so much is because this is an opposites attract romance. She is very overbearing, but the hero just takes it all in stride. He is unbothered by her attitude. And it's really great to see that. Like, he isn't put off by her, very forceful, strong personality. And of course, their first meeting just kind of like really made me laugh, and I was very intrigued. She is traveling to Bath because she's trying to escape her hometown since her former fiance is coming back with his wife and she's pregnant. So she got jilted. And she's one of like the Bedouins. Like, nobody jilts a Bedouin. So she wants to go to Bath because she doesn't want to be in the mix of all that drama. And on her way there, she's traveling like alone with her maid. This man bursts in to her room in the middle of the night, and she is like, I will scream this house down. This is my room. Do you know who I am? I'm the sister of a duke. And he's just like, haha, no you're not. Why would you be traveling alone? Anyway, he does not think that she'll do anything about it, but she does. And he has to jump out of a window. And they're pretty high up. He does survive, and then they meet again in Bath, and she like calls him out because she thinks that he was propositioning a maid and she was defending the maid's honor, but then he kind of turns the tables on her. And so they actually enter into this fake dating relationship, and I just really loved it. I really, really, really loved it. So yeah, The Bedouins is definitely a hit this year. Another favorite was Taken by the Horde King by Zoe Draven. I am in love with the series. I love the Horde Kings. The first one, of course, I picked it up because it had that Game of Thrones vibe, the Dothraki, you know, Khal Drogo. I'm still obsessed, it's fine. And Taken by the Horde King, I really like the premise of it. We have another heroine who you can start kind of seeing the type of heroines that I like. She's a human living on this world. They're basically refugees on this planet, but they have been there for decades. And there's been a shakeup in the world. They're no longer in their village, and they're hiding out in this mountain. And there's new leadership, and the new guy who's the new leader is horrible. He's basically being a tyrant. He's keeping all the food to himself. He's forcing himself on some of the women. And our heroine, she has a stammer, and she does use that to keep this man away from her, but she also has this power. So some of the humans, the heroines in the series in particular, are finding that they have some abilities, and she has this ability that could possibly help her escape because there's this red mist that's surrounding this mountain, and it's harmful to the natives on the planet. But since their group is basically starving, there are some witches on the planet, like they're practicing black magic, and they basically tell the humans, hey, we can help you, but you have to capture a Horde King for us so we can do a spell. Obviously they mean no good, and Mira goes out into the red mist to lure one of the Horde Kings, the one who's keeping watch on this red mist to make sure that it's not spreading, and she lures him into the mist, and he hears in his mind the goddess that they worship is basically saying, this is your mate, this is the one that's meant for you. And so he like gets himself captured because he was literally following his heart, and he feels betrayed once he realizes that. But the way that he is so betrayed, and he just like, she means nothing to me. She's obviously not my mate. He still feels protective over her. And yeah, the tables get turned and he captures her back eventually. And I really like that. Next is A Matter of Temptation by Stacey Reid. I cannot say enough about Stacey Reid. She's one of my favorite historical romance authors. And this book was such a surprise because she does have the series A Sinful Wallflowers, and we weren't really expecting this standalone to come out. So I feel like I kind of heard about this book last minute. I think Crystal had the ARC, and I rushed to see if I could get the ARC, and I was lucky enough to read this, and I was really blown away. The heroine has a brother who He is trying to make money for the family because their estate, it's not profitable anymore. They're orphans. And he tried to cheat at cards. He was caught, and then instead of being called out, he decides to challenge the person who noticed him cheating at cards to a duel. And the sister is very worried about this, and she's like, okay, we're twins, and if I knock him out, I'm the better fencer, and I think that I could actually succeed in this duel, so I'm gonna go do that. So she dresses up like her brother, she participates in this duel, and she beats him. And the hero, Simon, is like a renowned fencer, and he figures out very quickly that she's a girl, and he is not put off by the fact that she's a girl at all. He's just like, oh my God, you came and fought instead of your brother. He's kind of impressed, and he offers her a job. So she becomes basically his secretary. I love the way that this couple pines after each other, because he's trying to be a respectful employer and she's trying to not get her hopes up with him, because obviously the most important thing is to dig them out of debt, and she doesn't want to do anything to jeopardize her job. But like, the things that he does for her are so freaking swoony, and I can't even freaking stand it, okay? I love this book. It was amazing. 6 stars. It's like one of my favorite historicals this year. Now, there's no way that we can talk about the best of 2022 without mentioning Kennedy Ryan. I mean, she is consistently one of my favorite authors ever. I think that she is definitely the author that has the most powerful stories. I was talking about this with Crystal the other day. What sets Kennedy Ryan's books apart for me is the fact that nobody does soulmates like Kennedy Ryan. It's the way that she writes these couples, the small touches, the looks, the glances, the feelings. It makes me believe, like deep down in my soul, that these two are fated to each other. Like, it feels like a fated connection between these characters. It's not just lust or love. And I don't know of another author who makes me feel this way. And Kennedy Ryan is just a magician, honestly, when it comes to creating characters like this. And I was a little bit nervous going into this one because it was a second chance romance, but she has written second chance romances. She's written quite a few that I absolutely love, and she's knocked them out of the park. But this one was a little bit different because they were a married couple who had been divorced for a couple of years. I think that was one of the best decisions, as well as have them actually be divorced for a while. And this book is one of the books that made me cry this year, and the things that this couple was going through were so raw. And I love the way that she talked about depression and therapy. I loved seeing them interact with their kids as well. It was just, this book was such a treat. It was beautiful, and I cannot wait for the next in the series. I don't believe it's coming out next year. I think in the interview that she did with Crystal, it's going to be in 2024 that she'll be publishing the next in the Skyland series, which I'm very excited about. I loved the heroine's friends, the glimpses that we saw of them, and I just can't wait to see what more she can do. Like, I truly, nothing that I can say can do Kennedy Ryan justice, because her books speak for themselves. You just have to read them and you'll be blown away too. Now, this next one was one of 2 that I discovered in December, which was late in the game for the year, that became like all-time favorites. This one, Mile High by Liz Tom Ford. It was so good, okay? This was recommended to me by Caitlin, and she has been killing it with the hockey romance recommendations, but this was my favorite by far that she had told me to read, and I'm so glad that I did. So our heroine is a flight attendant, and she's working exclusively on a private jet for a professional hockey team. And our hero is, he and his best friend. His best friend is married, happily married. They have a kid. They have the same agent, he and his best friend. And apparently the way that they got onto this professional team, or the way that the agent was marketing them and promotes their image, keeps them relevant, is to have them be opposing figures, where the best friend is like the wholesome one. He's the family man. And our hero, Z, he is kind of like the man whore, the person who gets on fights every night on the ice, you know? So he has curated this image. And at first when I was introduced to this character, Xander, I was like, I don't know about him, because I also struggle with like man whorish heroes. Because don't get me wrong, he has a list of women in each city that they go to visit for games, so that he can hit them up and hook up with them. And I was just like, you have an uphill battle, sir. And he surprised me. So they hit it off. So these two kind of butt heads. He is a little bit overbearing, and they have a running joke that he calls her for everything the heroine. And I really like her character because her brother is a professional basketball player. And their parents kind of look at the brother, it's not necessary, I retract that. Her mother looks at her as a less successful sibling and always makes her feel bad about herself, about where she is with her life. You know, she is a flight attendant. She also works and volunteers at this animal shelter where they take in elderly dogs who are least likely to get adopted, and that plays into the story beautifully. The mom makes her feel terrible about her body, and I really, really, really love the way that the author handled Stevie's body image issues, because I think that it gave Z such an opportunity to shine and show us his true colors, the non-man whore, the way that he cared about her, the way that he was so insightful about what she was feeling and wanting to make sure that she felt cherished, she felt loved, she felt beautiful. And I think that that was such a smart move, and I think that it was just absolutely wonderful. So Mile High just has my heart. I'm so glad. Thank you, Caitlin, for telling me about this book. Another one was Funny Feelings. So this is another December read, and I'd seen it. I probably wouldn't have picked it up by myself, and mostly because I kind of avoid any illustrated cover like this. But this is a friends to lovers romance, and I'm a sucker for a good friends to lovers romance. It reminds me a lot of Marvelous Miss Maisel. The heroine is a female comedian, and she has had a crush on her manager, who is also a comedian, but now he's retired and he's, managing her career. He also writes. He's a single dad. These characters were truly friends, and I feel like this is what I'm looking for and sometimes missing in other friends to lovers romance. I want to feel like the characters are truly like best friends, and it's moving that relationship from platonic to romantic that creates a situation where the pining is so achingly beautiful and sweet. And that's what I got out of this book. The pining between the hero and the heroine was awesome. Okay, and of course, Heartless. Come on. Heartless. Elsie Silver, man, I mean, she's an author. Here's an author where I feel like I'm always looking for small town romance authors, because they tend to be my palate cleansers. I have like a list of authors that I normally gravitate towards if like I'm in a book slump and I'm like, okay, well, I gotta go read one of theirs because she'll probably get me out of a book slump. Well, Elsie Silver came in swinging with this series. Flawless was, of course, amazing, but Heartless just has every single trope that I love. And the fact that the author put all of these tropes in this book and they all freaking worked is amazing. He's a single dad. We have an age gap. It's a nanny romance, forced proximity, opposites attract. Like, this book truly has all the tropes that I love. He's a grump. She's very sunshiny, very cute kid in there. I mean, blew me away. And Elsie Silver is the reason why I am actually actively looking for more cowboy romances, because Cade, Cade. So then we have Across a Moonlit Sea. This one was really interesting because it's actually set in Elizabethan times. I don't know of, I don't want to say I've never read a book that was set in Elizabethan times, wow. A romance specific book? No. I have read other kind of like historical fiction books that are not technically romances that were set in this time period, but this one was so good because the heroine, her father, he has his own ship, he's a merchant, and her mother died, so she has been on this ship with her father for years. She is also a map maker, so she's like rough around the edges, and the hero is this privateer who has a, big reputation. He was betrayed and his ship was sinking. Her father goes to help him and he jumps onto the ship and he basically takes it over. So the hero and the heroine are butting heads because she's like, you can't take over my father's ship. And he's just like, watch me. And I love it. She's such a fiery personality. And he doesn't know what to do with her at first. Like, he thinks he can conquer her, but like, she's a lot to handle, and I just liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was one of the most enjoyable like pirate romances that I have read in a while. So this was definitely a standout historical romance this year. Then on the other end of the spectrum, Mafia Madman. This is a bonkers mafia romance. And it just freaking worked for me. It has its darker elements. I think that the situation makes it a little bit darker. It's captive, but it also has kind of humorous moments as well, because the heroine, even though she is half of his age and she is his captive, gives him so much shit. Talk about topping from the bottom, because she is just not having it. He is insane. He was held captive by her brother-in-law, and this is kind of like a revenge plot. So he's trying to be this hard ass and torturing her, and he is trying, you know, but then he can't help but be intrigued by her. And, you know, some of the torture involves sexual torture, and it was just so good. I loved it. He's like, he's an alpha male, guys. Like, if you don't like all this like mafia stuff, like, you're not gonna like this, because Enzo is unhinged, takes what he wants, and plays mind games, and yeah, all of that. But Gia, she really pulls her own and gives him the double middle finger like every chance that she gets, and I freaking loved it. Can't wait for the next one in the series. This is another series that I binged this year, and funnily enough, it was one of the later installments of the Pennyroyal Green series that really kind of like resonated with me. So it started with a scandal. This is, I don't know, book 9 in the series. 9 out of 10. Yeah, I think that it's book 9 in the series. And I really loved it. It reads very well as a standalone, so you don't have to read the entire series to understand this. Our hero is a Frenchman. He is kind of stuck in England, but he dreams of being able to buy back the land that his family owned in France, like before the revolution. He's also recently been injured. He got jumped by like 6 people. And so he's kind of like in this home temporarily in England, and he doesn't really care about it, but he does need a housekeeper to keep the staff in line. And our heroine is a single mom. She's never been married, so she had this kid out of wedlock. And we get a sense that she's not of the working class, but she will do anything to protect her son. So she really needs this job, and she gets this job that everyone's just like, he is overbearing, he can't keep a housekeeper, and then the staff, they don't want to work at all. But like, she is like, this house is dirty, like, we're gonna do a good job because I don't want to get fired. My friends helped me get this job, like, I'm gonna do a proper job. And Philip LeVay, he makes it so hard because he's so broody, and it feels kind of like Beauty and the Beast and kind of like Jane Eyre as well. It has like those elements. And I think that the banter in this book is really standout. Like, I loved the way that they talk to each other. And her son was so cute. He's not like an overbearing presence in the story, because I know that some people just don't like to read books with kids in it, but I think that he does play an important role. And I really do like the interactions that are on page between Philip and her son Jack. But yeah, I love this book. So glad that I stuck with the series. Okay, next, monster romance. A Company of Fiends. So the first book in the series, it's Tempting Monsters. They follow different heroines. Like, the third book will have a third heroine as well. And each of these heroines have their monster harem. The first book, the heroine was very sexual in nature. She loves sex. That was a very interesting read. But this one, she works at a theater company. It's basically a sex club. So she already has, you know, casual sex with monsters for entertainment purposes, but she's not actually in love with any of them, and it's basically just a job to keep, you know, a roof over her head. The way that this romance and this harem builds, it's a slow burn. So this is quite a thick book, and I think that Catherine Moon's choice of the slow burn to develop this harem was really great, because I think that each of the heroes, there might be 5 heroes in total, I feel like they each get their chance to shine. And I don't want to like name favorites, but I do have favorites. And there's an interesting one that it's one guy, but he has like kind of 2 personalities, maybe even 3 personalities if you want to count it that way. But I don't know. I just think that Catherine Moon is very unique when it comes to creating monsters for a monster romance. And I really like the way that the harem develops. Again, it's just, if you're looking for a bonkers monster romance, I think that this is such a fantastic one. It's a very long book. I tend to find monster romances are usually short to the point. They're really smutty. They're for the like smut sex stuff. This is not that. I feel like it's a little bit deeper. And I really liked it. So, yep, I love that. Another Kate C. Wells, Run, Posey, Run. I saw this book a lot last year, and I finally picked it up for like Mafia Romance Readathon. So glad that I did, because I think that Kate C. Wells made like the perfect psychopath in Dario. He is such an interesting character to be inside his head, because it starts off in an interesting place where the hero and the heroine are already in a relationship. But it's a superficial relationship and they don't really know each other that well. Then there is a moment where the hero thinks that she's betrayed him, that she has slept with somebody while she was in a relationship with him. And he's all about loyalty. So he basically like dumps her on the side of the street. Then he realizes that someone basically set him up and he wants to win her back. But he has to capture her because she's not coming willingly. She has seen the light. She realizes that she was just being a kept pet, that he never respected her, and she's not going to settle for less anymore. So he has an uphill battle to convince her to stay with him. And it involves lots of threats at first. But I really like the way that his feelings, of course, are very possessive towards her, but then actual genuine affection does develop. And I think that it's interesting for a person who truly is quite a psychopath. I think that it's a hard type of character to do well for me. And he's just a perfect example of a psychopath hero. And she's his perfect foil too. Like, it doesn't work without her. I love Run, Posey, Run. So my next two are, both of them are books that I don't think are my typical reads. Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. It does have a romantic plot, but it's more fantasy than anything. And I was very charmed by this book. Crystal was reading it and she was just, telling me about the book. And with no intention of me reading it, I was just listening to her gush about, the things that this author was doing. The heroine was a widow, and the family that she married into, they were snooty. She comes from like a village or whatever, but she had been helping the wealthy person in that family like take care of him. He was elderly and he recently dies, and he gives it all to her. Well, the family members who were like treating her poorly are basically like locking her up because they're trying to figure out a way to get her to marry one of like the cousins so that they can get access to this money that she was willed. So instead of, and it's very humorous, all the way that this is written, it's very humorous. So she decides she's locked in this room and there's this like decorative sword on the wall, and she's just like, you know what, I'd rather die than be miserable with this family. And she pulls out this sword and she's about to stab herself in the heart, and then all of a sudden this man materializes out of the sword, and he's from like hundreds of years ago, and he thinks that the new sword wielder is like in a brothel. He thinks that she's like a lady of the night. The first interaction is freaking hilarious. So she unwittingly discovers this sword with a human soul in it. And he's a warrior, and he has had different wielders throughout like the past, millennia or so. And he becomes her protector because she needs to find a way to escape this family and make sure that they can't touch her money. And she wants to try to help her family, who she hasn't seen in a very long time. So they go on an adventure, and the adventure is super fun. And I want to read more by T. Kingfisher. It was a really great time. I loved it. But yeah, not specifically a romance book, but it has a romantic plot line in it. And then this one, Manacled. It's a fan fiction. It's a Draco and Hermione fan fiction that I read at the beginning of this year. I will eventually bind a copy for myself. Eventually, I have all the supplies. I just have to have the time to be able to do it. This book is freaking long. It's like 1,200 pages of fanfic, and it is dark. It is depressing, but it was freaking magical. I was blown away by Manacled, truly. It's the only fanfic that I've read so far. I kind of had planned to dive deeper into fanfic. I have a whole list of the ones that I want to read. I've never been a person who has been specifically into fanfic or anything, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to like dive into it. But whenever I do have a choice, I tend to gravitate towards traditional, just regular romances than I do to fanfic. But yeah, I know that there's tons more that I want to try. But yeah, this Draco and Hermione fanfic it's really beautiful. It's challenging to read, has lots of triggers in it, but it is wonderful. And the artwork that people have created for this fanfic is fantastic. Mind-blowing. So yeah, that is it. That concludes my most favorite of the faves for 2022. And I think it'll be interesting to see in 2023 how all of the stats compare, because I just have a good feeling. I have a good feeling that I'm going to be able to complete a lot of my bookish goals for 2023. I'm definitely going to be a romance reader who is actively looking for more historicals, especially by authors I've never tried before, as well as fantasy. So those are the two genres that I want to read more intentionally. I think that the reason why contemporary tends to dominate a lot of our reading space is because they tend to be on KU, and I think it's the more accessible subgenre of romance for people to write in as well. But that doesn't mean that there are not tons of historicals and fantasy romances that I have yet to discover yet, and I'm sure that there's ones that have been out for years that I will discover next year, and I'm very excited about that. So overall, 2022 has been a pretty great year, but I do have a feeling that 2023 is going to be better. So yeah, I can't wait. I'm very excited for the new year. Can't wait to discover more new books. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already, subscribe to my channel. Make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye guys.